Hello and welcome to Methodism 101 and our first session, Epworth and the Wesleys. The family story of the Wesleys goes back centuries to Gerald Wesley on the father's side, and as far back as the Reverend John White on the mother's side. The Reverend Dr. Samuel Ainsley, Susanna Wesley's father, was a nonconformist minister. By this, I mean he was not in the Church of England. And he raised his children, including his daughters, to be thinking people. And when Susanna came of age and she explored and decided she wanted to be an Anglican, a Church of England member, and her reasoning was convincing to her father, and he gave his blessing. Later on, she would marry the Reverend Samuel Wesley, and theirs was an interesting marriage. Samuel was a brilliant scholar, but not a very good manager of the family finances. In fact, on more than one occasion, he spent time in debtor's prison. He had, as I said, a brilliant mind and spent a lot of time working on his thesis, on his magnum opus. And this took him to London quite often. And the problem with being an academic when you're serving in a market town in North Lincolnshire is that your congregation isn't necessarily your biggest fan. And so the Wesleys, well, there were two fires at the rectory. At least one of them was arson. The second took place when John Wesley was 6, and all the children were accounted for except John, and he was spied calling out from a third-story window, and a human chain was formed to go up and rescue him, and he was, as his mother said, a brand plucked from the burning. Now, Susanna and Samuel had 19 children, 9 of whom died before the age of 2. Several died within weeks or months. That meant there were 10 children residing in the rectory, plus servants, plus the parents. It was said that you did not know that there were that many people living in the house. Such was the strict way that the Wesleys, particularly Susanna, ran the household. Not in a arbitrary or mean-spirited way, but she instilled discipline to her children such that when she needed quiet time, she would put her apron over her head, and that was the sign that she was in prayer and not to bother her. Each of the children were given a specific time each week where she and the child would sit down face to face and talk. They would go over lessons, they would share what was on the child's heart. And so each child felt that they were valued. Now, Epworth is, as I said, in North Lincolnshire, or Lincolnshire, and it's a town where if you were to go today, you could go to the church, St. Andrew's, where Samuel Wesley was the vicar, and his grave is right outside as you walk up the path, close to the entrance. Off to the side, there's a raised grave, sarcophagus, I believe it's called, and that's where one time John Wesley went to preach, because he was not allowed to go inside to preach, because by then he was a leader in the Methodist movement. This experience of being in a home where on the one side you had academic rigor. His father had or could have been an academic. On the other side, you had a mother who understood the value of thinking and owning your faith. And that's what she instilled in her children. There was on the blog, there's a posting on yesterday that Susanna Wesley's house rules. And I'm going to read just a couple of them to you. Number 1, eating between meals is not allowed. To teach a child to pray as soon as they can speak. Give them nothing that they cry for, and only what is asked for politely. Require no daughter to work before she can read well. Preserve property rights, even in the smallest matters. Never allow a sinful act to go unpunished, and never punish a child twice for the same offense. You see, these rules, these way of raising children may strike our ears as being rather peculiar, but in the early 1700s, this was considered in many ways radical, because the children were seen not as property or not as insignificant, but they were seen as children of God. And so what I would hope you would take away from the Wesleys and their time in Epworth is that this was the place where not only were they raised in a family, but they were instilled with the value and the relevance of faith in their life. This is a place where love was known. And this is what they took into the world. Thank you.